So, who's a fan of the Three Stooges? Just about every YouTuber with an iPhone video has visited the Three Stooges gravesites, which is fine, and maybe that's why I've waited so long to do it, because it's already been done so many times. But I wanted to see them in person anyway, so I thought I would do a video for any of you who might just want to see my perspective. And you can never get too much of the Three Stooges, even if you've already seen their graves once or twice. Can't hurt to see them again. Hi everybody, thanks for joining me on my tours of cemeteries, gravesites, memorials, and final resting places of the famous and infamous people who are gone but not forgotten. I'm going to start my visits to the 4 cemeteries and the 6 gravesites of the comics known as the Three Stooges at the gravesite of Moe Howard. I believe that Moe and Larry were the only 2 Stooges who appeared in all of the films. The other 4 Stooges came and went over time, but Moe and Larry were there from the very beginning and made it to the very end. Moe's real name was Moses Harry Horowitz, and his final resting place is located at the Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City, California. His crypt is located in the Garden of Memories in the Alcove of Love, which is just inside the front gates to the left. It's the first mausoleum you see as you enter through the front gates on the left-hand side. It's hard to believe that the Three Stooges got their start in vaudeville back in 1922. That's almost 100 years ago. They were together for nearly 50 years, from 1922 until 1970. They started making movies in 1930 and made 220 films over the next 40 years. In the late 1950s, their movie started being shown on TV. And as a kid, back in the 1960s, I think me and my brothers watched all 220 of them on TV. Their silly slapstick comedy has really proved to be timeless and seems to appeal to generation after generation. Today, they're considered one of the most popular comedy teams of all time, and they're probably just as popular today as they were back in the 1920s. This is a Jewish cemetery, and they're closed on Saturdays for the Sabbath and also on Jewish holidays. So if you're planning to visit in person, make sure and check your calendars ahead of time. And if you're wondering what that noise is in the background, that's the very busy 405 freeway that's just across the street from the cemetery. Now I'm going to hop on the freeway and head east for about a half hour or so to the city of Whittier. Shemp Howard and Curly Howard are both laid to rest here at the Home of Peace Memorial Park. Like the Hillside Memorial Park, this is also a Jewish cemetery. Shemp's real name was Samuel Horowitz, and he's interred in a crypt inside the Home of Peace Mausoleum that's located right in the center of the cemetery. It's a fairly small cemetery, so it's easy to find. The mausoleum itself is fairly large and a bit like a maze, so I'll walk you through the hallway and show you how to get there in case you're planning to visit yourself. His Find a Grave memorial page has a GPS, but even with the GPS, I found it pretty difficult to find. That said, I didn't really mind. The mausoleum is so beautiful and has so many interesting things to see that I didn't really mind that it took me a little extra time to find Shemp's crypt. And I noticed by the date that Shemp died fairly young as well. He was only 60 years old. He died in 1955, just a few years after his brother Curly. It's nice to see that Shemp and Curly are buried here in the same cemetery, but it's too bad that Moe, who died 20 years later, chose to be buried in a different cemetery. I'll pan around so you can see a little bit more of the corridor here where Shemp is laid to rest. Now I'm going to head back outside to the gravesite of Shemp's younger brother, Curly. He's buried not far from the mausoleum in the southwest section of the cemetery. You can see the western side of the mausoleum from his grave, and Shemp is buried on the eastern side. Just to give you an idea of where they're located. Shemp is inside the mausoleum there. Sadly, of the Six Stooges, Curly Howard lived the shortest life. He died at the age of 48 in 1952, which was just 20 years into the 50-year run of this comedy team. But even though he was only with the group a very short time, he made a huge impression and is still one of the most popular Stooges. It's interesting to see how his headstone has part of his real name and part of his stage name. Curly's real name was Jerome Lester Horowitz. After all these years, I finally made it to Curly Howard's gravesite. I've been to just about everybody else's, it seems, but for some reason, I guess every time I've come here, I haven't been able to get in. It's a Jewish cemetery, and they're not open on Saturdays. And for whatever reason, I think a couple times I've come here on Sundays, and they haven't been open. Maybe there were Jewish holidays as well. But I finally got in today, and I really had a difficult time finding it, but somebody else was also here to visit Curly's grave, and he showed me how to find it. And we found Shemp's crypt together as well. So who was your favorite Stooge? Of the Three Stooges, or actually of the six Three Stooges, who is your favorite Stooge? Everyone seems to have a favorite. It seems that Curly, who's buried right just a few rows over here, actually right there with all the rocks. I don't know if you can see all the rocks on top of the headstone there. That's the backside of Curly, Jerome Howard's grave. Let me walk over here again. He seems to be most people's favorite, I think, most fans' favorite, but all of the others were very funny, and I'm sure they all have a lot of fans as well. So here is Jerome Howard, died in 1952. So he was before my time. All of the Three Stooges were before my time. And fortunately, when I was growing up, we had reruns on TV, and they ran all the time. My whole childhood, we were watching the Three Stooges, as probably most of you were as well. And now we've got YouTube, and we've got streaming, Hulu, and lots of different streaming channels, so we can pretty much watch anything, anytime, which is really fantastic. You know, I didn't grow up in a time like that. You know, all we had were reruns, and we had to be home, you know, after school at a certain time to watch them. Now you can watch them anytime you want, so much better than it used to be. From here, I'm going to take the freeway northwest to the city of Glendale. At Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, I'll be visiting the final resting places of Larry Fine and Joe Besser. Larry's real name was Louis Feinberg, and his crypt is located on the first floor of the Freedom Mausoleum. After you enter the doors of the mausoleum, you walk straight ahead until you come to the first corridor. You make a right-hand turn and continue straight ahead until you reach the second corridor on your right-hand side, which is called the Sanctuary of Liberation. And there you'll see on the left-hand wall, in the bottom row of crypts, the final resting place of Larry Fine. I've been here a few times, and every time I stop by, I see that fans have left different items. After all of these years, he's even still receiving fan mail at his gravesite. I'll pan around so you can see a little bit more of the corridor where he's laid to rest. There are quite a few other famous people interred here in the Freedom Mausoleum, like two of the Marx Brothers that I just visited a couple of weeks ago. But today I'm just visiting the final resting places of the six actors who played the Three Stooges. If you see behind me here, this is the Court of Freedom Mausoleum right there. And I just came out from visiting the crypt of Larry Fine, one of the Three Stooges, and I also wanted to visit Joe Besser, who was a stooge for a while, one of the Three Stooges for a short time, and he's buried actually right here outside the mausoleum. You can look up and almost, if the windows were open, you could probably almost see Larry Fine's final resting place, his crypt. So it's kind of cool that they're both buried here so close to each other. It's kind of close to this beautiful pine tree, which offers quite a bit of shade. So I don't know if you can see his grave. It's that one right there. Now, to find this, I checked out Find a Grave. It took me forever, even though there are little markers, little number markers and things, it took me forever to find this grave. Well, I shouldn't say forever. It didn't take me as long as some of them have taken me, but it still took a lot longer than it should have, because it's right here, and I had a picture and directions on, I knew which section it was, thanks to the person who posted the Find a Grave photo. But there was no GPS. So this was, like I say, probably done a long time ago, and the person didn't have GPS on their phone. Well, I do, so I just added the GPS. So if any of you are planning to visit Joe Besser's gravesite in the future, just check out Find a Grave and just click on the GPS and it'll take you right there. And so I've been trying to do that a lot more lately. Sometimes I forget because I'm busy photographing and talking about the person's grave and doing a video tour, and then I forget to click the GPS, because a lot of these don't have GPSs, and they can be so helpful. They can save you sometimes hours. From Glendale, I'm going to hop on the freeway once again, and I'm going to head northwest to the city of North Hollywood and the famous Valhalla cemetery. Not far inside the front gates on the right-hand side is the final resting place of Curly Joe Derita. Not only was he the last stooge, but he also lived to be the oldest, and he was the last one to die. He lived to be 83 years old, and he died in 1993. I also think he has the best headstone, since he's the only stooge with a photo and the only one with an epitaph. The last stooge is pretty funny, and it kind of says it all. They all have good locations in their various cemeteries. It's just too bad that they're not all together. That would be kind of fun. I'll pan around so you can see a little bit more of the cemetery. Like the other cemeteries that I've visited in this tour, there are also lots of other famous people buried in this cemetery. But today I'm just here to visit the final resting place of Curly Joe Derita. He was the last stooge, and it's my last stop today. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. And if you're a fan of one or more or all of the Three Stooges, please leave a comment down below, especially if you have a personal story or ever met any of them in person. And as always, thanks for joining me today, and I'll hope to see you next time.